Hello, how are you? I hope everyone is gesund, stark, und freilich, begashmis beruchnis. I hope everyone is healthy, strong, and happy physically and spiritually. Today is Yud Adar. Yesterday was Tes Adar, the anniversary of the Frierdiker Rebbe's arrival on the American shores in 1940. So it's a very big celebration of Yom Tov for Chabad Chassidim and for world Jewry, as we'll explain. Today is Erev Shabbos Kodesh Pasha Zocher. Pasha Zocher is a very big Shabbos, especially by Chassidim. Chassidim have always farbrained very powerfully, very strongly on Pasha Zocher, and there are many Chassidic tales connected to Pasha Zocher. Also, this Shabbos is the Yortzeit of my mother, Imi Meirosi Meras Blume Bas Rebbe Alexander Zusha Aleim Hashalom. So, one more thing, it's also Pasha's Tetzaveh, obviously. So we have to understand the connection between all these things, as will be explained. But first we'll start off with a prayer, which is going to be the subject of today's talk, which I hope is not going to be too long, because on the one hand it's going to be a bit different style. Usually I like to focus more on one subject and go more in depth. This time I'm going to be talking about one subject, but more skimming through a lot of different aspects of that subject. So the prayer is as follows: Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam malbish harumim. We give a bracha, a thanks to the Eibishter every morning. How many ways do I love you? How many ways do I have gratitude? And one of the things is that we're giving a special blessing to Hashem, who dresses those who are undressed. So obviously the simple meaning is talking about that, thank God, I'm in a position in life that I could buy my own clothes, that I have clothes. So it seems that it's not only about being able to afford clothes, but it's about the concept of self, that we have clothes, malbish harumim. So that is the subject today. The subject is clothes. And there's many, many, many different definitions, interpretations, and layers of meaning in the concept of clothes. So let's get straight to the Parsha. Everyone knows that what is the main focus of Parsha Tetzaveh? Big Day Kahuna. And this is what the Pasuk says. First we're going to read 3 Psukim. First to talk about the general command. Then we're going to talk about certain instances, what the Pasuk says about them. But it's talking about a couple of garments. There were the garments for the Kohen Gadol, and there was the garments for the Kohen Hedyot. Now is not the time or place to get into the details. But right away, close to the beginning of the Parsha, it says, Vasiso big day kodesh la'aron achicha. You should make garments of sanctity for Aaron your brother, lechavod u'lesefores, for glory and for splendor. Those are very famous words, lechavod u'lesefores, that can be applied to many situations in life, where you want to make a upshanish, a simcha. You say it should be lechavod u'lesefores. It should be for glory and for beauty and for splendor. Okay, so that's one pasuk. That's the original pasuk, which is the command about all the garments. And we say that what is the nature? What is the meaning of it? And where do we see the importance? There's a pasuk that says later, "V'hoyal Aaron l'sharis v'nishma keli b'voyal hakodesh l'fnei Hashem u'v'tzeisoi v'lo yamos." This is talking about the me'il, and it says that Aaron should wear it, and he should be wearing it in the when he enters the sanctuary, and when he leaves, and he will not die. And Rashi on the spot says over here, "V'lo yamos mechlal lav atashmei ahein." From the fact that we say that he won't die when he's wearing the garments, we see that if he's im yichkones mechuser echad min abugadim alolu chayev misa b'dei shemayim. So this is a category called mechuser begodim. When a person's lacking, the kohen is lacking one of the garments, it's a very grave thing. And later on also on pasuk mem hey, if I remember correctly, or maybe mem gimel, sorry, and the pasuk says in mem gimel v'hoy al an val bonov b'voyim elel moyde begishtam al zbeich l'shoz b'kedesh v'l yisu ovayin v'meisu chukasoylam lo yilazari acharav. So here too the pasuk says that Aaron and his children should be wearing it when they go into the oil moed and when they go to the mizbech, and they should not bear a sin and die. Here too Rashi says, V'mesu halamadata shameshamis mechusa begodim b'misa. So here we see the severity of someone who did the wrong thing by serving, lacking the garments. So obviously we have to understand what's so important about these garments. And that's going to be the main focus. So first we'll start with actually the concept as it is over here in this parsha. So when you look at the commentaries and we speak about what's the reason why the kohanim have to have these garments, so actually there's three purposes, three ideas behind it. One is that these garments are befitting for Hashem. Like you have the royal guard. When we're talking about Hashem, was the Melech, Malcham, Lochem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So just like we understand by a king, you have to create a certain aura, a certain ambience, a certain atmosphere, that every single detail of the atmosphere it represents, is meant to amplify and enhance a sense of royalty, a sense of awe, all for the king. So too over here, the Kohanim, since they're in the Beis HaMikdash, and we are coming to the Beis HaMikdash to serve Hashem, so everything about the Beis HaMikdash is something which is Yasaloi Yisbarach. It's befitting for the king, for Hashem. So that's one interpretation. Another interpretation, the way the commentators explain, that it's befitting for the Kohen. Like for example, obviously when we say it's befitting for the Kohen, it's because it represents someone who serves Hashem. But the idea is that it shows that they're special people. Like for example, when you look at a judge and he's wearing a robe, and the judge comes into the courtroom and you say, here comes the judge, and everyone all rise. What are we rising for? We're rising for the robe? No, but it's what the robe represents, that this is a man who spent his life studying law, and we should respect that. So too over here, when we're in the presence of a Kohen, who Hashem chose to serve, because they're special, they have a special kedusha, we have to give a special honor to Kohanim, always. So, too over here, so this is what it means. They wear the garments, the chavei, the lucifaris, for them. It represents their special status in holiness. Just like a judge, for example. So that's the second interpretation. The first interpretation of chavei, the lucifaris for the Eibishter. A second interpretation is the chavei, the lucifaris for the Kohanim. But a third interpretation, which is not connected to the Chavod and Safaris itself, but the third purpose of the Bigdei Kehuna is because that is what's meant to make the impact on us. The purpose of the Bigdei Kehuna, like we said in the first point, that everything is pointing to Hashem's glory, the atmosphere, but why that itself? So then when we walk there, that inspires us and impacts on us. So therefore the Bigdei Kehuna is to inspire us. When we go into the Beis HaMikdash and we see the Kohen dressed in Bigdei Kehuna, it enables the Kohanim to be able to fulfill their purpose, which the whole Kohen was meant to bring us closer. That's their job. They bring us closer to Hashem. By them wearing these outfits, this uniform, it brings us closer. Now obviously there's another, a whole different aspect to the Bigdei Kehuna, Kabbalistic interpretations, and the Gemara also talks about how every garment represented a different sin and atoned for a different sin. But we're talking more general over here, so let's leave it at that. Number one, it's for Hashem. It represents His glory. Number two, it represents the Kohenim's glory. Number three, in order to impact on us. Now, just to bring an example, the Alter Rebbe, in chapter 42, he says a very interesting thing which applies over here. It's a very famous analogy. He's talking about fearing Hashem and a level of fear of Hashem. And he says the following. You look it up there if you want to get more deeply involved. But in the Haggadah, there's a note. And he writes the following words. V'hinei, gam mi shelo yiras hamelech me'olam, ve'eine makire klal, af al pi kein, k'shenichnas l'chatzar hamelech, v'roye sorim rabim, v'nechbodim, mishtachvim l'ish echad, tipel olav emo fachad. So it's a very interesting analogy, because first you could say, is it obvious? They're all bowing down to the king, so it means I see the king. But the point is, if you have zero awareness to the king, in other words, you don't know his character, you don't know his exaltedness, you don't know how smart he is, you don't know how awesome he is, you don't know how he is, you don't know him at all. But you know what makes the impact? You know what becomes deeply ingrained? When you walk into the Chatzar Melech, I'm just going to read the English translation. Even he who has never seen the king and does not recognize him at all. Nevertheless, when he enters the royal court and sees many honorable princes prostrating themselves before one man, there falls on him a fear and awe. So this is exactly the first point that is explained concerning Big Di Kahuna. And it's beautiful because the way it relates to the Beis HaMikdash is perfect, because over there we don't see the king. And the Alter Rebbe over here is talking about the Eibishter. So in other words, we see how the external has such a deep impact. That's why there's a whole idea of a Beis HaKnesses and how we're supposed to act in a shul and respect for a shul. V'chuli, v'chuli. So the same thing's over here. The Alter Rebbe says, when you walk into the courtyard and you see how everyone else who does know the king is standing in awe and they're besotted and they're transfixed by this presence of this person, then that itself impacts on you. So the same thing over here. When we go into the Beis HaMikdash and everything in the Beis HaMikdash, the Kalim, the Big Di Kahuna, represents the Chavid al-Safar, is going back to the first interpretation of Hashem. So then when we walk into that Beis HaMikdash and we see those Koyanim, it's like the Alter Rebbe says over here, like imagine you walked into the royal courtyard and you see everyone prostrating themselves before the king. So in a way, and this is also connected to the Marshal, you could say, talking about a king. He has a crown, he has a scepter, he has a robe. It's the royal robes, it's the royal scepter, it's the royal crown. You know, it's connected also to the story of Purim, that we see it makes a difference. When Achashverosh says, how are we going to honor somebody who saved my life? And what's the answer? By him putting on royal garments. So we see how in high esteem it represents the highest level. So the same thing's over here, where we can't see the king, but we're able to see, metaphorically speaking, his robe, his crown, his scepter. That's all the Beis HaMikdash, and the utensils and the koyanim, etc. Okay, now there's another, and this will soon explain what this means to us. What relevance does it have? Because we also say in general that all of the Yidden are called Va'atem Tiyuli Mamleches Koyanim V'Goy Kodesh. So the entire Jewish nation is Mamleches Koyanim in a certain sense, Koyanim. So that means that this idea of Big Di Kahuna is also relevant to every single person, and also the idea of L'Chavid L'Sefaris. So let's talk about this, and in this itself there's going to be 2 points. Number one, physically, the idea of dressing with a state of exaltedness, with a state of class, for lack of a better word, but class in the same way, Yasalei, what's befitting for a Jew, as a B'nai Yechidah Shel Melech Malchem Lachem HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as a Bas Melech, so connected to Tznius. That's a simple sense. But then there's also, and we'll get to that, and then there's also how Chassidus talks about Levushim in contrast to Koiches. So I'm sure I spoke about this before, because this is one of the cardinal fundamental concepts in Tanya, the understanding of the distinction between the person's Koiches and the person's Levushim. We'll just spend a couple of minutes talking about it, because this makes the whole difference. And then Bashtet, the demarcation point, what distinguishes or differentiates the Beinoni from the Tzaddik. And the point is as follows. We have koiches, man's faculties. What are man's faculties? We'll say his IQ, his chokhmah, bina, das, and his koiches, his character traits, his midos, his emotional character traits. So those are called as koiches. So again, your IQ, your character traits, to put it in one word, your personality. So those are the 10 attributes. It's called the 10 koiches hanefesh. Then we have the 3 levushim, the 3 garments, machshava, dibur, umaisa. And that represents your actions, your activities. Thought, speech, and action. Now, over here when we say your thoughts, we're not talking about the thoughts that fall into your mind by itself. We're talking about what you choose to think about, what you choose to allow to fill your brain space. So and I'll soon explain. So let's start from the bottom. The difference between koiches and levushim. Let's say we said to a person, you have a certain nature. You're generous, you're stingy, you're calm, you're nervous, you're very, very tolerant, you're very the angry sort. And we say change. We'll say to change a character trait could take years. And there's a famous word, I said this once before, where certain Polish Gutta Yid said, it took me 21 years to work on the attribute of truth. 7 years to differentiate between that which was true and that which was false. Another 7 years to drive away that which was false. And another 7 years to acquire truth. So that took 21 years to work on Midas Emes. There are people that are very nervous and very intolerant and not generous and so on and so forth, are very egotistical. It could take a lifetime of hard work to try to change, and still it takes hard work. 50 years later, they will still be honest and say, you know what? There's still a side of me that wants to lose patience, to get angry. I still have to work hard at my anger management. So what is that talking about? Your koiches. When it comes to an IQ, theoretically, when it comes to a character trait, an emotion, to change that is almost like changing yourself. It's not the same. I don't want to get into etzem hanefesh and koiches. You could change your koyach, but it's almost as if you have to change yourself. In contrast, if we say levushim, let's start about Maisa. Maisa means you could do an action. It doesn't represent who you are whatsoever. So, if I have a best friend that tells me, Yankee, I'll give you now $1,000 if you dress up in Purim in a gorilla costume and run up and down the street and say, I don't know what. So, let's say I decide to get up dressed up in the monkey suit. Does that mean that's me? No, because it's going to be in a suit. No one's going to know who's there. And it doesn't represent me at all. But if it'll make that person happier because I'll get $1,000, I can do it. So an action doesn't represent the person at all. In other words, or let's take a simple example. Someone will say, do me a favor, could you go to the 92nd floor and buy me a Coca-Cola can? So you could do it. Does that mean you're happy to do it? Does that mean you're passionate about doing it? Does that mean you're excited about doing it? No. But you'll do it because it's easy to force yourself to do something. And ace, lases, ace, not lases. You could turn it on and turn it off whenever you want. And that's, by the way, why it's called garments. The machshava dibur ma'aseh are like garments. You could put it on, you could take it off. And the same things with speech. I could say now that 2 plus 2 equals 39. Should I say it again? 2 plus 2 equals 39. I just said it. Do I really believe it? Does it reflect my understanding? No. But I could say 2 plus 2 is 39, and my name is George Washington, and I live in Brazil, and the year is 1642. Every single word that came out of my mouth is completely not what I believe and not what I think. But I could say it. So we see clearly that dibur doesn't reflect the person. And again, eis l'daber v'eis lachshis. I could be quiet right now. So you are in control of your dibur and your maisa easily. Not like by koiches. And now we come to machshava, the same thing. I just want to repeat. The thoughts that fall into your head, involuntary, that taka represents deep, subconscious, etc. But the thought that you decide to think a certain thought, right now I'm going to fill my brain space with this thought. Just like I said before, 2 plus 2 is 39. Right now I could say, you know what, I'm now going to think the thought that 2 plus 2 is 39. Or I could say, I could think about the price of eggs in China. I could decide right now to think about the price of eggs in China. Does that reflect what I'm really thinking about? What I usually think about? No. But that's my control on my machshava. I can let into my machshava what I want to let in, and I could try to shut out what I don't want to let in. So now, let's get back to Big Day Kodesh. There's a famous Hayoim Yoim that says the following. And I'm going to read it to you. It's the Hayoim Yoim of Hey Sivan that says that Erev Chag HaShavuos, Tov Kuf, Nun Zayin, the Alter Rebbe said a Torah, and the Torah was V'kidashtem hayom u'mocher, V'kidashtem hayom u'mocher zeh u'mayla. I want to read the original, then I'll translate, because I think there's a certain special value in reading the original. V'kidashta b'yemim mochazel m'mayla, aval v'chipsusum leisam does daf min alein. And that was the whole Torah. And then the Tzemach Tzedek explained, v'kidashta is gizog geworden zu Meishen, und es pashtus de Meishen b'chol dara v'dara. V'zeh ken heilig machen dem heint und dem morgen. Aber man darf dazu, v'chipsusum leisam, levushe machshava dibra meise, was does daf min alein. So here we have a Torah, the Alter Rebbe, that inspired the Olam, inspired the whole masses, and the Tzemach Tzedek explained what it meant. Moshe Rabbeinu was commanded by Hashem to sanctify the Torah tomorrow. That's why he prepared the Yidden to receive the Torah. So that means being in the presence of Moshe, listening to Moshe's Torah. Moshe is the magician, the spiritual magician and wizard that can bring you to heights that you could never reach on your own. In other words, you need a Rebbe. A Rebbe could take care of things for you and enable you to take care of certain things and reach heights, spiritual heights, that you can never reach on your own. Fine. That's the V'kidashta ma'yemu mocher, which, by the way, it's known that people used to go to the Rebbes in the early years, the Rabbeim, starting from the Baal Shem Tov, for tikkunim, for restitution. I don't want to get into it now, but so many stories connected to the Alter Rebbe, the Mittel Rebbe, the Baal Shem Tov, were stories about people that did something wrong, and then the Baal Shem Tov will tell them, do this and this, and the day will come. That's when you'll know that all is taken care of. So for that you need a Rebbe. But taking control, what we call a Shulchan Aruch, taking control of your machshava dibra ma'aseh, that's the message that Hashem tells Moshe, that the v'chipsusum loisam, that the people have to do themselves. The Rebbe is there, the teacher is there, the rabbi is there, the spiritual coach is there to do things that you would not be able to do on your own. But then there's certain things that you have to do yourself. Your machshava dibra ma'aseh. So this is the lesson, and this is one of the most powerful lessons of Tanya, connected to this idea of the garments being a person's actions. It's very important for two levels. One level is that we see that what Hashem asks from us is not about ranks, it's not about levels, it's not about reaching great levels of spirituality. It's about doing the right thing. And that's in your control. And that's one of the major stresses and important themes of Tanya, that the Beinoni is someone, he's called the Beinoni, he's calling Mr. Average. Why? Because he's not going to be a saint. He's going to have a struggle, he's going to have an animal soul, he's going to have great difficulties working with his koiches, with his personality. But you know what? That's not the main focus. The main focus is to make sure you're taking control in the area where you can take control. You levushim. But guess what? But wait, there's more. There comes a second point, which Alter Rebbe also stresses, which is called Hergel Nasa Teva. That if you work hard enough with your garments, so then it makes an impact even in your character traits. And now's not the time to really get into the thing at length, but it's connected to a famous story and in this story itself there's two versions. Somebody once came to the Alter Rebbe and says, you have Chassidim, they're learning Chassidus and learn about high levels, and they start going through the motions, but they're not really there at all. They're fakers, they're hypocrites. And the Alter Rebbe answered, one of the versions of the story goes, I'll tell you the second one in a second, but the first version, one of the versions is, what's called a hypocrite in Hebrew? A tzavua. And the word tzavua comes in Hebrew from a dye, when you dye your garment. And the Alter Rebbe says, when you dye the garment, that becomes the color of the garment. So it's a profound insight in the word hypocrite. In other words, fake it till you make it. It starts off that maybe the chassid was doing this, he was going through the motions. But if he's going through the motions enough, then that itself becomes ingrained and engraved and etched into his personality. See chapter 14 of the Tanya at length. The second half of that chapter with Alter Rebbe gets into the subject. The other version goes with Alter Rebbe says, there's a Mishnah that says, the person who makes himself, like he's lame, becomes lame. The person who makes himself that he walks with a limp, actually becomes such a person. So he said it's a clear Mishnah that says when you make yourself, and over there the Mishnah was talking about in the negative way, like if a person is going to make fun of someone who stutters, like then the Eibishter will make him become a stutterer, so to speak. But the Alter Rebbe took that Mishnah and translated it to mean in a positive sense, when you will make machnach, in other words, copy what someone else is doing in spiritual levels, then it'll rub off on you. You'll become that thing to a certain degree. So this is all telling us about the importance of garments. So now let's connect it to my mother's yahrzeit and garments, physical garments. Everyone knows the importance of tznius, which is connected especially to women, and the posik, kol kvuda bas melech penima, and the stress and the importance, even though there's laws of tznius that are connected to men, but by women it's even more important, more stressed. And you know why? Because they're more precious, they're more valuable. That's why kol kvuda bas melech penima, the sanctity, the royalty, the exaltedness has to be especially enhanced, and that is brought out through following the laws of tznius. And my mother represented the ultimate of a bas melech, a daughter of a king. She had pride from where she came from her heritage, from minkach, and in her parents, and in her family, etc. We spoke about it already other times, so therefore I'm not going to elaborate today. But this is what I took from my mother. She brought from the old school, from the old country, her values and her virtues and the qualities. And she always spoke about it and imparted to us those values and those virtues from the Alta Heim, from Minkach, and that's the way it's supposed to be. That's standard, etc. So that's the connection to my mother's yahrzeit, and connecting it to Tetzaveh, the Frierdiker Rebbe coming to America. In America, before the Frierdiker Rebbe came to America, it was called the Treifa Medina, the Treifa country. And why? And the Frierdiker Rebbe says many times in the sichos of his, as Altzes with the attitude menmeg, you're allowed. And Amalek shows on kaltkeit, asher korcha b'derech. It's getting late in the video and I want to end it right now so we can elaborate. Amalek represents the indifference. What are you getting excited about? And if you'll do the easy way, is it so bad? Amalek comes along and says, nothing's a big deal. Why are you getting so excited about a minute? And then the Frierdiker Rebbe says something, I forgot. It all starts, he says, Mishnayta bisel abda, Mishnayta bisel abda. And the Frierdiker was talking about the tailor, but he meant, first he cuts a bit of his beard, then he cuts a bit of his garments, less tzniusdik, then he cuts off a bit of his tzitzis. The whole Yiddishkeit is, he trims it, diminishes it, dilutes it, and that's what Amalek is, because it started off by saying, this is not so important. Why do you have to be the extremist? Why do you have to go hardcore? So we'll make it a bit modified. And that's the whole point. Amalek hebt on mit kaltkeit. He makes that the thing that you could relax, calm down, etc. And the Frierdiker Rebbe was the one who made in America in the 1940s and onward. There's lots of stories the way he brought out that he educated the Bachrim who came to Lubavitch. They should wear beards. At that time, only great Torah scholars wore beards. And the American teenagers of Lubavitch Yeshiva were walking down the street and people would honk the horns. They looked like the hillbillies. Farmers from Idaho and Kentucky walking in the metropolitan city of New York. But that was the exact point. And I'll just finish with a story that is a famous story. By the way, recently there was a chassid, his name was Rabbi Gordon. He passed away and he was the son of the very famous chassid Rabbi Yochanan Gordon. So there's a story that Rabbi Yochanan Gordon said, and Rabbi Yochanan Gordon represents a small number of Hasidic Jews that moved to America in the early 1900s, and all their children remained observant and with the program. And many, many did not merit that. And it's very, very sad. Even though many came and they themselves were observant and had such mesiras nefesh not to work on Shabbos, but alas, it didn't necessarily pass on by the children. But here's a story that Rabbi Yochanan Gordon said about himself, that he was once walking in America when he first came to America, and he saw a long line in the street. So he decided to go on the line, because when he was coming from Russia, when you waited on a line, it was to buy bread, or there was some material reason that you had to wait online for some material goods, merchandise, that by waiting online, that was the only way you were able to acquire that merchandise. He saw a long line, he decided to join the line. Anyways, he's standing on the line, and another person walks over to him. And by the way, another person walks over to him and says, Rabbi Yid, why are you waiting online over here? So he says, what do you mean? It's because obviously there's so many people here on the line. It's because they're going to acquire some sort of merchandise here. It's a place they're going to get something. So this person was another Yid, says, hello, Dutak Sabar, you're wearing a beard. So I want to let you know that this is a line for a theater, for some sort of Broadway show. It's not the place for you. You shouldn't be here. So Rabbi Yochanan Gordon, said about the story that the fact that he was wearing a beard, hatim geratevet, it saved him from ending up verveis vu. Because he wore a beard, and the beard represented that he's somebody who is, has a certain standard. Big Day Kodesh, the beard was like Big Day Kodesh, l'chavit l'sefaris, it represented a higher standard of vatem tili mamleches kohenim v'goy kodesh, goy kodesh. So therefore, Taka, automatically, it saved him. And Taka, all of his children and his grandchildren, the from this story, we could see how it's that sort of standard, that sort of approach, which will also rub off on your children and your grandchildren to understand that you have a certain standard, there's a certain point, the hivdilonu, that separates you from every single Tom, Dick, and Harry, and Joe. You're a Yid. And therefore you have Big Day Kodesh, l'chavidul safaris. The Rebbe should help. I'm not sure if I'll make another video before Purim, so we should have a Feirich of Purim, and even before Purim, we should be very successful in uprooting and destroying the Amalek from within us, all sense of doubt, all sense of coldness and indifference and apathy, and in the merit of our doing what we have to do, Mashiach should come, take it from a yad, mamish, posting from my home, Be'ez Hashem Yisbarach, your man in Melbourne.